you, everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome, of course. Appreciate it, and appreciate the getting here through that weather, which my drive was a journey, so I assume yours was as well. This is me. Let's talk about Gradient. So Gradient Ventures is a Google-backed early-stage investment vehicle, and we focus exclusively on machine learning and AI oriented or enabled startups. So it's got to be core to the product, core to the differentiation. And our interest in this is really getting exposure to early stage and applied AI. And it's been a fascinating 2 years since we launched. There are so many companies that are really, the ML first companies are coming out just now. There are so many more use cases and applications of AI, growing and becoming exposed every quarter, every month, every week. And so it's been a really exciting journey. A little bit more about Gradient. So it is Google-backed, but we are an independent investment vehicle. We have an independent partnership. We're investing for ROI primarily. That said, we want to do more for startups than just offer, financial support. So we do, everyone on the team is ex-engineering or product. We take a very technical lens to our investing. And we offer a bunch of support like a startup rotation program where we have dedicated engineers and product managers who work with Gradient and deploy within our startups and can help accelerate technological development. We have a focus at the early stage on machine learning. So our corpus of knowledge, our community is all focused on those early stage challenges and problems. And we have a community now of 60, 70 co-founders, and it's growing every day when we add new investments that can really advise each other on the commonalities and the problems that those companies see. So it's been an interesting journey. The goal of this talk is to talk through some of our learnings, as an early stage investor, as we see these startups come across the same challenges over and over again. There's really interesting learnings. So that's the primary topic here. Where have we invested so far? Just sort of getting an idea of some of the more tangible examples. It's across verticals. There's a thematic, vertical-oriented AI. There are use case-oriented machine learning companies, and then there's a machine learning enablement. So a tangible example within verticals. One of our investments is a company called BenchSci. They do antibody research for pharmaceutical companies. So imagine if you want to test out new antibodies, new potential drugs, and there's a corpus of research that you could spend your entire time, dozens of scientists reading research just to know what the new enzymes and antibodies that you might test as part of a drug could be. Or you could have artificial intelligence do that for you and help you search the antibodies that are proven based on research contemporary with your studies. Another one is Scotty Labs, which is doing teleoperations for trucking and for automotive. So you would think that we're all going to just leap forward to autonomous vehicles, and there's no interim steps there, but there are obviously a ton of challenges to that. Teleoperations could patch in, and you could have human support. So that's sort of the human-in-the-loop element of both training models, but also making sure we have safety when we have autonomous vehicles on the road. Use case-oriented investments. Here we have a couple of interesting ones. Alio is a company that does recruiting for mainly hourly and other workers, but they do it at scale. So, they are touching enterprises that do employ, hundreds of thousands of employees, and they can do all of the recruiting through SMS or through Facebook messaging or whatever really touches their potential recruits. Another one we have is long-form communication, speech to text, translating and summarizing meetings, and really interesting things around that. Machine learning enablement, the premise here is, all the companies in the world shouldn't have to build their own machine learning tool set. So we want to help companies be able to train, deploy, and scale machine learning. And some of the companies we have in that space are Algorithmia, which is great for machine learning deployment, or Labelbox, which is great for training data sets and labeling data sets. So those are the investment areas that we sort of highlight. We now have over 30 investments, so it's been a busy 2 years. And it's really interesting to see some of the evolution. So maybe some more tangible sort of early stage strategy and tactics for machine learning oriented companies. So this is the profound slide, right? We look for team, market, traction, product market fit. That's it, I'm done. Nothing else to talk about here. No, I'm kidding. What's a special? Like I kind of look at these things as check boxes. You know, they're kind of the required. But what is a special? What's a standout? What's a unique thing that really gets us excited about an opportunity and sort of converts us towards investing? First is a long-term product roadmap. And long-term potential product roadmap is probably the right way to caveat it, because we all know startups pivot, we all know things change. But the prior slide was kind of more demonstrations of abilities to execute on near-term opportunities, right? And that means that you found a core value proposition, you found a core use set or use case, and you're starting to tip the scale. But really, in order to get excited about an opportunity, you have to believe that there's going to be a long-term sustainable competitive advantage. I know that's business school jargon, but the opportunity within machine learning is to find key points where there is an expanding, each building block that you build in terms of a use case or a value proposition enables subsequent ones that get more interesting, expand the value proposition to your customers, continue to differentiate you, make your technology defensible. So a couple of examples to make it a little bit more tangible. One of our portfolio companies is called Zeroa, and they help with all the visual assets that enterprises would have to manage. So by that I mean photography, charts, video, PDFs, contracts that are saved in PDF, all of those visual assets, right? The first thing you have to do to be able to make those assets more valuable to a business is be able to index them, make them searchable, make them identifiable, and make that the case across all sorts of different technical infrastructure where those assets might reside. And that is a near-term value proposition. Of course, they're tipping the scale with a bunch of customers on that, but over time, where can that get more interesting? Well, they started out with media and entertainment companies. And of course, visual assets are the core IP of media and entertainment companies, so that's a pretty strong initial value proposition. But then it starts to get interesting to oil and gas companies, to mortgage companies and banks, because they have those contracts. They have those similar digital assets that over time, they want to be able to search, they want to be able to identify special fields within them, they want to be able to utilize those things and run queries on them like, how many mortgages do I have in this zip code with this credit score and other interesting, queries and business intelligence elements. The interesting thing about that is it's a long-term product roadmap because each different vertical that they can address has its own subset of needs. Each time they add a customer that needs special labeling for their particular use case, they gain scale, and then when they go to another customer within that vertical, they can apply the same things to it. So there's a feedback loop between product, value proposition, broader data set, and then going to other customers within that space. And there's sort of a vertical element to it, there's a use case element to it, and we think that's really exciting and an interesting opportunity. Another thing that we really of course sets a startup aside is if that long-term product roadmap includes something that will accomplish, what is impossible today. That's of course exciting because we are investing at the early stages. We're looking at companies that to have a really interesting opportunity in 5 or 10 years, which is the life cycle of the average investment, the average successful investment, we have to be accomplishing things that are really challenging. So an example here, we have a company that we just closed the investment on, so I can't disclose the name, but if you think about how voice assistants are engaging, how we engage with voice assistants right now, there are certain languages that are supported predominantly, and if you don't pronounce things the right way, or if it's not, you don't sort of have the native dialect or tongue or accent that voice assistant was trained on, you can't really engage with it, right? There's all the mistakes and errors and things like that. There is a global community, of course, that is engaged with technology, and it's only expanding. And there's a global, increasingly globalization, increasingly we're all interacting across borders. What this company does right now is help people speak in dialects that are closer to the target language that they're trying to speak in. So it's in the language learning cycle, if I've learned the vocabulary, if I've learned some sentence structure, but I don't quite have that experience speaking, this technology helps you learn how to pronounce things, how to structure two words next to each other so that they both make sense and they don't merge together. Even the there's brain science that says that English basically breaks down to 50 to 60 phonemes. So you only actually pronounce or have 50 to 60 phonic sounds that you both hear and listen in terms of neuroscience. The challenge is that other languages have different phonemes. They have different buckets. Some of them have more and some of them have fewer. And so this technology helps train you to build new buckets neurologically and be able to identify and utilize new speech, right? So very interesting technology, but right now it's on that pronunciation. It's on that last mile of helping people learn how to speak and listen to new languages. We believe that over time, they can build further and further into flexible sentence structure, full flexible context of communication, and someday, we hope that you can do language learning by speaking to a voice assistant, which all the education research says that the fastest way to learn is to actually be speaking and listening to a new language. And so if you could scalably do that, that would be a fascinating opportunity to us, and that's certainly not possible today, and we hope it is in 5 to 10 years. Another area that we find really interesting is, and this is because we're at the very earliest stages, right, is opportunities that come about because of technological shifts. Of course, within machine learning, there are the sort of more established areas, computer vision, natural language understanding, and many others. There are more frontier elements, more developing technologies, be they generative learning, homographic encryption, the list goes on, but the one area that I think is particularly interesting, and I continue to look for opportunities and applications for it because I think it solves a lot of business problems, is called federated learning. So federated learning is the application of machine learning models where there is a sort of parent main model that provides some generalized use case or solution, and it can be deployed to customers or users and have subordinate models that learn with that customer or user, and the model both enhances towards that customer or user's use case, and then also can be pushed back to the predominant model or the parent model and provide updates to that model and continue to enhance that model. So, example of where this is used, if you've seen autocomplete in your email or autocomplete in your text messages, or those things where they're guessing what you're trying to say in search, for example, that is federated learning, and there's a predominant model for all of, for the generic broad population of all usages, and then there's a model that runs for you specifically, that learns how you speak, that learns how you like to complete sentences, and over time it'll get better and better. That's a pretty interesting technology. It has some great factors. One is that your private information, your actual experiences don't get published back to the model, right? It's all compressed into just one model update, a gradient, if you will, for gradient descent models, for those of you who are actually machine learning geeks. But that gets pushed back to the predominant model, and it can then update when there's a large population of updates. You push that to the main model, and no one can tell that it's all generalized enough that it's impossible to differentiate who caused what model update. So that's an interesting for a user. It's interesting for customers because one of the predominant challenges in business use cases for machine learning is data privacy, data security. If I'm a customer of a machine learning startup, I don't want the insights and the learnings from my data to be sold to my competitor. But if we can all agree on a federated learning approach wherein we all contribute to a master model, but we all have tailored models as well, and our data isn't shared, that's a pretty interesting use case for industry-wide machine learning models and insights. So we're big on federated learning. I can't believe more startups aren't pushing this. I've been pushing it for a while, so if you have a startup that you think this might be relevant to, certainly fascinated to hear about it. I'm gonna have to speed up because I'm running out on time, but I sort of started with, of course, we look at teams. All businesses are people businesses. It couldn't be more important. I think startups need to think about their people strategy. I think it needs to be, how do we run our executive team? How do we think about culture? How do we think about recruiting? How do we think about retention? I liken startups to small boats in the ocean. You need everyone rowing in a similar direction to have a chance of surviving. One person rowing in the wrong direction can be a really big challenge. And if you're continually recruiting or trying to get more people to row, it's also a challenge. So that's another space that we really look for, interesting teams, but people who are projecting a strategy around their people. Those were all strategy things. Those are all differentiators. Those are all sort of wild cards that it helps to get us to tip towards an investment. These are more tactical things. This is, if you're a startup in the room, if you're an early stage startup, I think that there are some really interesting learnings here. Of course, I can talk a lot more about them later. I'll go through one right now because I want to reserve some time for questioning. This limited data access, right, is a challenge that all sorts of startups run across when they're early stage, particularly business-to-business startups, convincing your early stage customers to trust you with their data, to trust you with their insights. This gets back to the federated learning point that I just made. I think that the challenge that a lot of startups approach this with is that they think about trying to convince the customer, you can trust me. It's all about security, it's all about compliance. You can trust me, and therefore we're okay. I think most of the customers that we talk to, their biggest concern is more about their competitors, more about their partners, more about where does this data, where do the insights that you learn, where does it go from you and beyond? And I think that that's why switching the lens of this and getting your customers comfortable with how you will manage it, how it's an insight or how it's a benefit for the overall industry, finding use cases and value propositions that are consistent across potential customers and really aligning everyone around that. I think that's the lens with which our startups have convinced customers to convert and trust them with their machine learning projects. So with that, there's more here if you have questions about it or interest in chatting about it, and particularly if you're an early stage startup, I think it would be great to talk to you. I'm close to up on time, but I think we have time for one or two questions if there are any out there.
One question?
Sure.
Yeah, so how do startups, especially early stage startups, how do they overcome this whole cold start issue of not having a lot of data in order for them to train their models accurately to provide some type of benefit to their customer or clients?
Yeah, I think so. The question was, how do startups get over the data bootstrapping challenge of not having data to start from? And there is a sort of chicken and egg problem here, right? Where in order to win a customer, you have to show a value proposition in order to get access to their data. You don't get access, but without access to their data, you can't show the value proposition. We have found a couple of interesting takes on this. One is to think about your first couple of customers as partners and not just customers, and be willing to take on the sort of the services challenges, the long-term engagement, but also be willing to share either investment with them or share a special partnership deal where they get particularly good pricing, or other unique data access. We have one example here of a company that's doing medical imaging studies, so trying to enable computer vision to be applied to X-rays, MRIs, things like that. They finding either research institutes like Stanford Health or others, or finding private radiology groups that are willing to really partner with you, become an investor, give you access to a broad data set. I think it is a key element of bootstrapping a startup now. You kind of have to bootstrap your people, you bootstrap your finances, and now you have to bootstrap your data access. It is a critical challenge, and it's something that we work with our startups to solve. So.
We can do one more question. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Microphone.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. I had a question around what you mentioned about getting companies to trust an AI product coming in and sort of, working on that model. I think you mentioned sort of working within that culture and then training the parent model, the federated learning that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. What are ways to achieve or get companies to trust you quickly? Because that's something, I'm an early stage AI startup, and that's something that we've got from companies. How do we win trust?
Yeah. These you guys are both pointing out great challenges that unfortunately there's no magic solution to it, but there are a couple things that we've seen work. It is there's the element of security and compliance where in an ideal world you would have certain certifications and approvals that get you over the hump on some of those. But the transparent truth is that most startups don't have the resources, particularly at the early stages, to go through all those compliance things, and that would be a big sort of a big detour from the regular product roadmap to try to get through there. It's about finding the right decision maker at the company. It's about demonstrating the right level of alignment with their incentives and structure. And I think, most importantly, it's about being very transparent about what you can actually deliver. I think that, this communicate, deliver, and deliver proven product, I think that one of the things, there's such a gap between the reality of what AI can deliver and, the hype around it. There's also a gap between, what startups can deliver, and you're always selling a little bit of what you can do in the future versus what you can do right now. And I think that the thing that we talk about with our companies is being very transparent about talking about what can I deliver now, selling primarily what I can deliver right now this year, and what the deliverables will be in that cycle, and then never selling anything that you can't deliver within the next year. So the longest you should be talking about roadmap and deliverability in a defensible manner should be 2 years out. I think that those, but being very transparent about what the timelines are, what the milestones are, is a big part of it. Other than that, it's like if you can find executive sales experience within that vertical, which is something that we try to connect a lot of our startups to, particularly in verticals that we have more experience. I think they can really help coach and help you get over some of the humps and understand what is going on behind the scenes to get approvals, to get IT and others on board. So thank you guys for the time. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing more on this stage And thanks.